Welcome to She Counts, the Real Talk podcast for women in accounting. We're your hosts, Questian
and Nancy McClelland.
And every episode, we're digging into the real experiences, challenges, and unspoken truths of life in this profession.
Because if you've ever felt like you're the only one, I promise you're not, and you shouldn't have to figure it out alone.
Special thank you to our Season 2 sponsors, Forwardly, Relay, and Client Hub. We are so grateful to them for helping us bring these conversations to life, enabling us to share out loud what everyone else is thinking, but no one is saying. You can learn more about them on our sponsor page at shecounts.show.
Remember, you can go to earmark.app to earn CPE credit.
And please follow the She Counts podcast on LinkedIn to join the conversation.
Today's episode is called Credit Where Due, the hidden cost of borrowed ideas. And borrowed is in quotes there. And we're going to talk about the many varieties, because there are so many, of plagiarism, having your ideas and materials scooped up, and someone else getting credit for work that you've done.
Really frustrating, right? And as you all know, we love launching each episode with a story. And Nancy, I know you've got a few, and the most recent just happened this week and really kind of inspired us to do this. So you're coming in hot.
Yeah, I am. I am coming in hot. This is going to start out like a therapy session because partially I just want some validation that it's okay to be pissed about this. But this was a topic that was already on our list. I think it was number 27 on our list when we first started planning episodes. And what happened this week was an inspiration to be like, you know what? We are finally going to make that one happen. Because I'm mad. I'm really mad.
And it's always better to talk about it when the details are fresh and you're passionate.
Yes, that's true. That is absolutely true. Spoiler alert, I am going to argue that the best solution to a lot of these issues is collective validation and ally action. I really do believe that. So you guys get to help me with the validation part of that right now. So here's what happened. Last year, I was invited to co-host an episode of QB Power Hour, which is run by Dan DeLong, who I love, great guy. And Rich Kane and I were co-hosting a session on 1099s, which is one of my areas of expertise. I've been speaking on this topic for about 4 years now. And I have a pretty distinctive looking slide deck that I use in every one of my presentations. And I tweak that slide deck based on, changes in rules or who I'm presenting with or whatever. So last year we did this session together. I said, hey, I already have a slide deck pulled together. Why don't we use this? And, I can make some tweaks to it. So we did. So that was last January. It went great. Had a good turnout. Lots of people appreciated it, blah, blah, blah. This year, I am sitting at my desk working, and I get a WhatsApp from my friend, Jennifer Diamond. Now, she and I actually presented at Scaling New Heights earlier in 2025. In June of 2025, we did a co-presentation on 1099s and creating a year-round workflow, which is something we're both really, really passionate about. She runs a site called 1099problems.io that is really, really amazing. And I use that plus Double for doing our 1099s. And so we did this whole session.
I use it as well. Yeah.
You use it too?
Mm-hmm.
They're great people over there. And this particular feature is just so great. So we had this whole session on that. And so she knew my slide deck really well because we've co-presented in the past on this. Actually, for Earmark, we did a presentation almost exactly a year ago. And then we did this presentation at Scaling New Heights. So she's really familiar with my slides that I mentioned I've been using for like over at least 3 years now.
Yeah.
3 1099 seasons. And so she sends me a screenshot and was like, hey, aren't these your slides?
So and I have to ask you, in that, so you see the slides in that moment, what what did you think and were you feeling? Like, what was your gut immediate reaction?
Okay, so you know me pretty well, so this won't surprise you. I have low blood pressure, interestingly enough, but when I get upset about something, it just low blood pressure turns into very high blood pressure and it just comes up to my head and my face and it feels like it explodes out the top of my head. I'm not kidding. This is exactly what it feels like. It just explodes out the top of my head.
Does it feel like you could
I
just, like, literally get hot in the moment?
Yes, I get
Yeah.
hot and my head gets kind of tingly and I get a little shaky and I'm just furious. I'm furious. I'm like, "Oh no, that did not happen." Right? And so I was like, "Yes, those are my slides." And I said, "Do you feel comfortable saying something in chat?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm talking with Sharon Fuller, who was also in there. She's like, I'm talking with her. She recognizes that they're yours too. We're going to bring it up. And I think it was Diamond who brought it up in chat. Maybe Sharon did as well. And then later on, I found out from another friend that they saw the LinkedIn post saying that this session was going to be happening. And they popped in and also saw that they were my slides. So I had a lot of
So not
validation.
only so not only were your slides used, but it was a presentation that you had done with these individuals before, and then you were not invited to
Yes.
that presentation again.
And I don't know why
Yeah,
yet. I still don't
yeah,
know
of
why
course,
I didn't get
of
invited.
course.
Maybe they just had too many people in the room because this year it was sponsored by Avalera, and so they were one of the presenters as well. And I found out from Dan later on that even they were using my slides and were making like adjustments and changes to my slides up until like 5 minutes before they were
Well,
going live. So
bravo to Sharon and Diamond, who I am not surprised, who I know well, and I'm not surprised, but I'm also proud of for, advocating and speaking up. Because I'll be honest, like I shouldn't be, but I would have been nervous to speak up.
yeah, yeah, I mean, it's scary. It's scary to speak up for yourself. It's scary to speak up on behalf of friends, like it is. And so it means a huge amount to me that Diamond was like, I see a problem. I'm bringing it up in the moment. And then when I asked if she felt comfortable, would she be willing to bring it up in the chat, she said yes, and she did. And she was like, "Wow, these look a lot like the slides Nancy prepared for my session with her when we presented for Earmark." Huh.
So this
Like
is
those
really like the catalyst, right? Or one of the main catalysts for recording the episode today, right? Is
Yeah.
it
I was so
turning this
mad. I brought it
into
up. Yeah, I brought it up with the Theater Public Speaking Society, which are, a bunch of women who've all been through this program, and was like, this happened. And they were like, could you name names? And I said, yes, this is one situation. Because I've brought up plagiarism before with them. But as we'll talk about later, there are different flavors of plagiarism. This one was really obvious. They simply
right?
reused my material.
Most of the time it's kind of insidious, right? Most of the time it's kind of insidious. You can't really like call it out and name it. You can tell it's there, you know it, but it's also like this was very blatant. And so,
Right. This was very blatant. And so I and while I one of the things that they asked in the theater of public speaking, they were like, "Did you bring it up?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." I heard from Diamond. I asked her to mention it in chat. And meanwhile, I wrote an email that was in response to the thread from last year where we were planning the episode, where I said, here are the slides that I created. Here you go, right? To make it clear. Well, this is that same deck. And obviously they'd made some edits on them, but I mean, it's a distinctive, we learn how to
yeah.
prepare distinctive decks in theater public speaking,
Well,
and this
and
was distinctive.
you did address this, right? And it
I
was
did. So I emailed.
acknowledged.
Yes,
Yeah.
I emailed, and the angle that I came at it from was, you are both, I did not say the words grown ass men, but I did say, you know better. Plagiarism is not cool. I don't appreciate this, and I need to know what you're going to do about it. And to his credit, Dan immediately responded. He was so apologetic, didn't even occur to me. Um, you know, I I just grabbed the deck from last year and said, Rich, will you update this? And, we were making changes. Avalera was making changes 5 minutes before we went live. And I was like, I, I haven't, I haven't fully responded to that response because I'm like, how did this feel like it was okay? And he was like, well, I was so busy and the slides didn't get updated in time and it didn't occur to me and this kind of thing happens to me, too often because, I try to delegate and then it doesn't happen. And basically I named plagiarism and he responded with process failure.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
And I'm assuming professionalism is mutual here and it turns out he did not see this as something that he should be aware of. And in my opinion, I believe that gap between how women name harm, because I was very clear about it. Plagiarism is not cool. How women name harm and how institutionally and societally that gets reframed in this situation, process failure. I feel like that is a very important distinction. That's a very powerful distinction. It's part of what I want to explore
Well,
today.
I wanna make a point that
Okay.
people plagiarize, but plagiarism, as far as I understand, now I haven't looked it up, but from my recollection, doesn't mean there has to be an element of intentionality, right? So you can plagiarize
Absolutely.
work without it being intentional. And so
Absolutely, and
reframing
he
it as a
was
process.
apologetic, like, it
Yes. Yeah.
legitimately did not occur to him that you shouldn't use somebody else's slides, and that's one of the things that I feel like I need to think about. How does that happen in society? And so I did a lot of research on it. Um, I mean, with this episode, I would like to do the harder and more interesting work of turning this very fresh wound into something that actually helps other women feel less alone and more equipped.
Yeah.
Um, because I really do this can happen at any level. Like, I'm not new, I'm not a junior level person. Like, this was taken from a recognized expert in this particular area. So this isn't just about being early career or insecure. This can happen at any level if boundaries aren't enforced. And I think
Well, and
that
I would add too that it happens to men as well, but there are
absolutely.
some very specific studies and information about how this happens to women, both in like more blatant pieces of work, like you were talking about your slides, or with ideas in a room, like idea sharing, and one person then resharing that idea and receiving the
Yeah,
credit for it.
absolutely.
So we're going to talk about like that whole spectrum.
Yes, it's a spectrum, and I think we need to be asking a couple important questions, like who's harmed when credit isn't given? And there's a big difference between men and women because in general, not only does it happen more often to women, but when the credit gets taken away, it affects all of us. It doesn't just affect that one person. Because if we're not enforcing these boundaries, and again, I'm going to argue that this is a responsibility that women have to each other. Is
Yeah.
if you see something, say something, call it out, do something about it, and help each other enforce these boundaries. Because when credit is taken away, there's one really interesting study in the sciences about women being given credit way less often, especially in male dominated fields. So when men are more frequently citing each other and not citing women, then that actually makes the leaning toward being a male dominated field bigger and stronger, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got
Right.
more and more over and over women not being cited. Now, obviously, we've got a field in accounting and bookkeeping where we're going in pretty much 50-50. But a lot of these women aren't making it to partner. That's something you and I have talked about a lot. And because those numbers drop off so strongly, I'm going to argue this is part of that problem. And so we need to be looking out for each other. We need to be saying something and in collectively validating each other, but also taking action as
Yes.
allies, whether we're men or women.
We'll talk about this later because we're going to understand why this happens, hopefully, at the end of the episode, who it really affects and how we respond, but it happens when you talk about, like, the allyship, right? It really is a matter of people listening and listening out for one another, and if you hear someone, like, repeating an idea or something like that, on your scale, it was big, but it could be as much as sharing a thought in a room and then saying, "Oh, yeah, you're right. Question just made that point, or Nancy just made that point."
Yes,
I think it really resonates, for example.
absolutely. Absolutely. When you hear it, and part of that can be, honestly, part of that can be just a way to make sure that other people are hearing that somebody else is having similar ideas so that you're removing some of the confusion later on about who stole what or whether we're both having similar ideas about something, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
which
So, okay. So,
happens.
our goal is we want to understand why this happens, who it affects, and how we respond. And question to the point that you were just making, let's talk about idea credit and attribution bias. This is something that there have been a lot of studies about. Have you heard of this thing called the Matilda effect?
Yes, but explain it for all of our listeners.
Okay, so um, this was something that Deb Kilsheimer brought up in. Well, see, look, I just did it. I was just like, hey, this is a thing that I was talking about with a person. This is not my original thought, right? Like this part, I just heard myself do it. I was talking with Deb Kilsheimer in the Theater of Public Speaking Society. And I was talking about this issue that had happened. And she's like, this is actually a really common thing. And it's called the Matilda effect. And I was like, yes, I was just reading about this. And in modern day, we call this idea credit and attribution bias, but it's basically the same thing. So the Matilda effect was something in science that was termed a long time ago because over and over and over, there were women who were systematically being undercredited. Their ideas were being systematically undercredited. So, some examples:
That's not
Rosalind
surprising.
Franklin. No, it's not surprising. Unfortunately, I feel
I
like,
wish it was.
yeah, yeah, I wish it. I totally wish that. So, Rosalind Franklin, she was the one who came up with all of this X ray crystallography data that was absolutely central to understanding DNA's structure. But the 1962 Nobel Prize went to Watson, Crick, and Wilkins. And those are the names I know. Watson and Crick are the names I know from growing up. Rosalind Franklin was never brought up. And the more I've looked into it, the more I'm like, dude, how is she not part of the Nobel Prize that year? Like, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible that it could have happened without her. Jocelyn Bell Burnell, she was the one who discovered the first radio pulsars as a grad student in 1967. And something really interesting about that, if you are a music fan, is that the famous Joy Division album cover is
Oh, I
actually
love Joy Division.
yeah, that's
The
actually, those
80s
are
new wave.
radio pulsars that she discovered. And that was a computer generation interpretation of her radio pulsars. But nobody knows who she is. But next time you see the cover of that album, you'll be like, hey, you know what? That was a woman who discovered those first radio pulsars. But then the Nobel Prize goes to her supervisor instead. Yeah. So, and then another one is Lise Meitner. Absolutely key to understanding nuclear fission, but Otto Hahn got the Nobel Prize in chemistry for that. So, like, this kind of thing has been happening so much and for so long in science that they actually have a name for it called the Matilda effect.
Yeah, that's I again, I wish that I was, but I'm not surprised. So,
Yeah.
and it is
Yeah. And
men are often, when these ideas come about, especially in the past history, and they're like the data and the studies that talk about this, like you were saying with academic papers that are being published, like men are often assumed to be the owner of knowledge and the woman the contributor, and those are really good
yes,
examples of that exact situation. So,
absolutely. And I mean, I think in accounting, it goes, it it's got a different angle that I think is really, really important to bring up. So much of our work is process, systems, teaching, translation of ideas, right? Those
Yes.
are the kinds of things that are generally more likely to be reused without attribution, right?
Yeah.
So, like slides, checklists, templates, workflows, that is very high value stuff, but it's just like, oh, those things are just out there. Those things are just out there. And so they're more likely to be absorbed rather than credited, even though they're super, super high value for our industry.
Yeah. I know. I agree. You see it happen because people pass them around to one another too,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
share them without paying the person who, um, created them. So,
Totally. And I mean, this kind of thing has happened to me more than once. It's happened at different stages of my career in different forms. Um, which is how I know it's not about personalities. Like Dan is a good guy. I genuinely like him and I would consider him to be like one of the nicer people in our industry, right?
yeah,
So
I
it's not
know.
about
You said
personalities.
I know. You had said that to me, like, right after it happened. You were like, "I
Yeah.
can't," I
I
was
There
having a
was no
hard time
malice here.
grappling with it, right? Yeah, no
Yeah.
malice. That's right.
Yeah, so it's because this is systemic. It's because it's institutional. It's not about personalities. It's about power, right? Like why does credit drift toward certain voices? I want to Let's talk about like how status affects who gets credited with things. You mentioned that women are seen as contributors and not
Yeah.
authors or leaders, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, it has a few different ways that happens or comes about. Like for myself, and I've told you this, like I've often in business and in social situations alike will be speaking and I'll share an idea and 1 minute later somebody else will repeat it or even seconds later somebody else just jumps right on and repeats the things that I have said and then I don't get credit for it. And one of the things that is mentioned is that there can be like a variety of reasons. Like you were talking about like specifically like what did you say? What word did you use? Like leadership level or something like that. So it can
Oh, the
be
status. Yeah.
status. That's right.
Yeah.
That's the word you
The
used. It
research
can
that's
be
done
that
on this, it's is all about higher status individuals being disproportionately credited as idea sources
right.
regardless of who actually introduced the idea. Yes.
Yeah,
So that's about
exactly.
status
And
and
so
that's not 100% about gender, right? Like status,
no.
a lot of things feed into status, but gender is one of them.
And it doesn't that's one of the ways, right? So status can be one of the ways that happens and, people looking at someone as more of a leader in a particular like hierarchy
Right.
at work for example. But then there's also other things like Vanessa Van Edwards talks about the
Oh, I
balance
saw her
between
speak at Intuit
competence.
Connect this year.
Yes, and she
She
talks
was
about
amazing.
I listen to a lot of her I like to listen to her clips on Instagram, but she talks about and this resonates with me because there is a balance between competence and warmth. And I think if you ask the people that know me well, one of the ways that they would describe me is very warm. And so what she's saying is that there is this balance kind of that is taking place. And if you are perceived as too warm, you can then be perceived as less competent, even though you are often still highly competent. And
Yeah.
so people hear you with less authority. And when someone says something with more authority, they tend to be the person who is heard and then receive credit for the authority. And also, it can have a lot to do with the the way that someone communicates and collaborates. So if you're someone who is a very collaborative person and you're really good at pulling ideas out of somebody else and giving them space to talk about ideas and you're also sharing them, then you often get less credit. And so it happens to me
I'm
like
gonna give an example of that that is very interesting. So my grandma Bunny, her favorite author was Dick Francis. And when his wife died, he stopped publishing books because it turned out she was so crucial to this process, what you're talking about, pulling out the ideas and like getting him brainstorming and thinking and helping him with the writing, that when she died, he was like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be also a that I mean, that makes sense to me, like, you and I have that collaborative energy, and you help me really come up with and fine-tune ideas. So, I think that's a big part of it, and it can also be this idea of, the way that people look for validation. So some people
Yes.
need validation and other people don't. And so it can be the way that you make a statement, the ending tone of your voice, or the fact that you need like some people do need more validation. So they say and do things in a way that kind of creates or gets that or helps them get that validation, right? So
And
I mean, it's
and
just a
here's
lot of
the thing that we can actually pick up on to help other women is, um, lots of women are not inclined to get that validation. They're not gonna speak up as strongly, right? So we can speak up for them. So, for example, you just mentioned that I help you, come up with really good ideas and, that we bounce off of each other, right? But then you say out loud to other people, "Nancy helps me do this. I love working with Nancy because she's like, you're saying my name. You're giving me that credit in a room when I'm not there to give myself credit."
that's right.
And I think that that is more important. Yes, this happens, this plagiarism and idea borrowing happens to men and to women, but women tend to suffer more when the credit is withheld. And so, one thing we can do for each other as both women and men is frequently bring up other people's names. And while that won't necessarily assuage your own ego, it is a different way to get validation because you can be like, look at all these conversations I have with all these really amazing people, right? It's
Yeah,
kind of like a really wonderfully genuine way of name dropping, right? So that is one of the solutions to this, both men and women, as we notice that somebody else, we've had a good conversation with somebody, drop their name, because otherwise this credit, it is going to drift toward higher status voices and people who have a bigger platform, a bigger stage
that's
than we
right.
do. I
Yeah.
got another speaking of stages, I got another
Oh,
story.
you do? Okay. I
Yeah.
wonder if you're gonna bring up a story that I was just about ready to ask a question about. Tell me what it is, and we'll see, because I think I know where you're going.
Okay, so this was not early in my career at all. This was early in my speaking career though. And it was at the National Society of Accountants for Cooperatives. So I used to specialize. That was a niche of mine is co-ops, which file an 1120-C. A lot of people think that that's a C corporation, but actually an 1120 is a C corporation. 1120-C is co-ops. And so I had been working in this area for a while. I had been inspired to there are kind of these two different groups in co-op accounting and one's like bigger corporations and one's smaller, and I was like, oh, I'd really love to teach these accountants who are working in these bigger corporations about these other areas of co-op accounting that I think would be really helpful and interesting to them. So I submitted to speak at the annual NSAC conference, and because I was not well known to their group, they said, in order to bring more credibility to your talk, we're going to pair you with the head of education at NSAC, and he's going to co-present. Yeah, can you guess what happened here?
I know what happened here. I can I remember this story, and that's why I got 2 thumbs down when you nobody can listening can hear it, but when she's starting to tell this story, I'm, like, doing 2 thumbs down because I know where it's going, and
Yeah, so
tell everyone what happened.
I created the entire talk. I created the slides. I did all of the data research, so all of the citations. all of the examples, 100% of everything. I did the intellectual and the physical labor. Like I created it all. I assigned my co-presenter the slides that he was going to be doing. I arrive ahead of time to the room to, meet up to do this presentation. And he has me sit at a table next to the podium to deliver my portions. And he stands at the podium for the entire time. I kid you not. I am now 53 years old, and like hell that would happen to me now.
Oh, of
But
course. Well, I mean, look, no wonder you were triggered when, what happened because it's not the first time that something similar has taken place. So
you know,
tell me what, so he has you sit there, he delivers
yeah.
this presentation, which is
Yeah, he
yours.
literally points to the slide at one point, and he goes, "When I prepared this slide, da 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 da." He literally said that I just swung toward him and looked up, and my jaw dropped, and I'm like, "Did that actually happen?" I mean, it was just amazing, and
I
I
know, and
don't
in
know.
that moment, you just want to stand up and say, actually,
Right. I really wanted to, but I knew that would reflect poorly on
you're
me. And
right.
I was doing that game where I'm like, okay, how much of this do I say out loud and how much don't I? Because I don't know how it's going to reflect on me. When women say something,
That's,
it
yeah.
it can have repercussions big time.
Oh, yeah,
Um
absolutely. I mean, what happens is we often get penalized for speaking up and named as difficult, right?
yes, yes, exactly. And
Difficult.
so I didn't want to be that person. And also, you're self-doubting. You're like, this was my first really big conference that I was speaking at, and I was like, am I imagining this? Like the self-doubt, even though it's freaking blatantly obvious, right? The physical staging is reinforcing this hierarchy. He's literally saying that he prepared slides that he did not, right? Like, but I still come out of it afterward and I'm like, did that happen? Maybe I misinterpreted it? Maybe he forgot that he didn't prepare the slides. I don't know. Like I was trying to look for some excuse. And my girlfriends afterward, I was like, did that just happen? They're like, that just happened, girl. That just happened. So I don't know if I told you what ended up happening in this story, though. Do you know that I got denied publication because of
Yeah, I
this?
believe you told me
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So what happened was it was a very popular session. And so they wanted me to do an article in the journal. And, but they wanted they wanted me to write it based on that talk. And they wanted him to be listed as a co-author. And I said, no, absolutely not. With all due respect to the inspiration that he has provided in other articles that he's written and in work that he's done, this is my work, and he already tried to take credit for it, did take credit for it in the session. I will be happy to mention in the article what an inspiration he's been, and I will be happy to refer to the work and even cite the work that he's done in this area. But this is not his area of expertise. This is my area of expertise. Most of what he has learned about it has come from me. I'm not willing to share the
So
author.
so you didn't get published. Did they
I didn't
publish it
get
at all
published.
under his name?
No, no,
Okay, so it
it
just
was just
didn't.
denied public. Yeah, no, it's not like that would have been egregious, but no, I was
I feel
denied
like
publication unless I was willing to surrender authorship. And I was not asking for like exclusivity. I offered proper attribution and ethical sourcing and professional integrity. And they were basically like, the lesson I took away from that is you can have exposure or you can have ownership, but you can't have both.
I mean, that would be the lesson that I would take away. That's basically what they're telling you. And they're telling
Yeah,
you that it's okay for someone to put their name on and use your work
absolutely.
inappropriately. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, going back to what you were saying about, when you were talking about status, power and access to platform, these amplify these problems.
Yeah.
It's, the seniority, institutional backing, the size of that stage, like it not only do people in that situation see it happening, but it also these when everything's getting credited, you know how when you look up a quote and it's like Albert Einstein, and it turns out he didn't say half of the things that are attributed to him? This happens
Yeah, it
with a
happens
lot
a
of
lot.
leaders. And that's not, again, that's not just a gendered thing. It's that we're looking at who has high status, who is it likely was the originator. Does it make sense that Albert Einstein would have said that? Yeah, sure, that makes
Yeah.
sense. I buy that, right? And and so authority signals this, and then we keep feeding into it, and it becomes normalized, and it becomes, from society will look at that higher status person and disproportionately credit them as idea sources. And
Right, and then the person who is the source of the idea, hesitates to speak up
yes,
because they are scared of getting penalized for violating, like, the what is it? The unspoken rules that they're of how you're supposed to behave, you
yes,
know, not through, like, a formal disciplinary action, but, like, social consequences, or being scared that
exactly.
you're not going to get the work, or you're going to be, viewed, like, like I said, as difficult and not a team player.
Yeah, I mean, we had a whole episode where we talked about like this I forget what it's called, but it's like this constant cognitive work that women are doing, trying to be like, is this, how do I speak up? Is this worth speaking up? And it makes us hesitate in the moment.
Yeah,
Um,
and
but
it's
there are
exhausting.
real, it is exhausting. But there are real consequences, very negative consequences, not just to the people who are not getting credit, but to women in general, because it's not about ego, like you were saying earlier. It's about professional capital, right? Like these things, when you get credit for them, you get more invitations to speak, or you get more sponsorships,
But it's
or it gives
also
you
it's
more authority, and that all leads to more income, right?
but it's also not just, so that is very important, but I wanna talk about another side of that too, is that it amplifies when that's not happening, you're failing to amplify diverse voices.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that is
So it's
so
like,
true.
it's harming you, but it's also societally harming everyone because you don't have those ideas and viewpoints which are so rich because they come from different cultural perspectives and just different perspectives in general. So
Totally.
it's
Totally. I That is such a good point, because I'm speaking at it from the perspective of when credit disappears, that like downstream from that, opportunity disappears. And you're saying not only is that opportunity disappearing, but it means that us as the audience, right? Like as the consumers of this information, we're not hearing the whole story.
we're not hearing the whole story, and we're actually getting information that isn't as high quality or as diverse. So there's
Yeah.
it prevents diversity of thought because you are preventing those individuals from actually getting credit for it and then continuing to create as well. Because if you go through this and it happens to you time and time again, you're going to be you'll just be jaded about
Yeah.
continuing to
It's
put
so
your
true.
thoughts and ideas out there.
It's so true. Yeah, you know, in trying to figure out why we don't speak up more often for ourselves or for our colleagues, um, I was again doing more research, trying to figure out like why do we hesitate in the moment, and we was reminded of everything that we've been talking about with this like cognitive load that we carry. But there is another factor going on here, that was I it kept coming across it, but I didn't know what it meant. And so I had to go to ChatGPT and ask it to look this phrase up for
We got
me.
it. We got
And
to credit ChatGPT.
yeah, we're going to credit ChatGPT with this
We
one.
gotta
So
make
the
sure
phrase
that when the robots take over later, or ChatGPT AI takes over later, that they look kindly on us.
yes, I don't want them to be mad at me. So the phrase that I kept coming across was social sanctioning. Have you heard of this? Cuz I had not.
Yes, I know, I
Okay.
understand what you're saying, yes.
I'm going to read the definition that ChatGPT gave me because this was not a phrase that I understood. Social sanctioning is what happens when a group penalizes someone for violating unspoken rules about how they're supposed to behave, not through formal discipline, but through social consequences. So it was going back to what you were saying earlier. This is really under the radar kind of stuff. And we don't even realize we're doing it when we do it. When we presume that someone else is the author and somebody else was the helper, or like the horrible thing that I do. If I see a woman who's an announcer on a sports something, I'm like, oh, she doesn't want to be there. She's like being forced to be there. It is the stupidest thing on earth. I still can't believe that I do this. And I have to exercise that muscle to be like, no, Nancy, she probably fought really
Oh my
hard to
gosh.
be there,
Can
right?
you even imagine how hard a woman
Oh, no,
would
I
have to
can't.
fight to be a sports announcer?
The
I knew
only way
one.
that I can imagine it is I know how hard it's been in accounting, and we have equal representation in
Mhm.
accounting up to a certain level. So no, I can't. I don't. I don't get it. I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine. But like to go back to what you were talking about earlier, being ignored or like talked over or quietly excluded, like you say something and then somebody else says it. What do you even do in that situation? Because when
I
a
well,
woman,
I so I, it's happened to me so much in my life that I've gotten used to it, but sometimes I'll repeat myself or I just get like, ugh, and I shrug. But recently, um, my partner watched it happen to me like repeatedly in a setting and was like, I cannot believe I was like, you see what's happening? And he was like, wow. Like,
and you're like,
and I
it's
was
not my imagination, right?
it's not my imagination. That's right. He was like, no, it's definitely not your imagination. Like I saw it. And then we were like hysterically laughing about it because it was like a handful of times. And, it was not intentional at all. It was like, and this was in a social setting. So there was not like intentionality. It was just like, so then I started kind of
But
researching
that's so
and
like
trying to figure out why.
intentionality. You said
Yeah.
earlier, intentionality is beside the point. Plagiarism and idea borrowing happens all the time with no intent, with no it, there's no malice necessarily. It
Yeah.
happens all the time. Sometimes there is, but what you're talking about and some of these other examples, when we actually do say something about it, like when we assert ownership, we're more likely to trigger this social sanctioning because we're
Yeah.
violating those expectations. Question, you're supposed to be agreeable. Question, you're supposed to be generous. You're supposed to be collaborative. So like it's it's when I set this professional boundary around my authorship, I was sanctioned like professionally in that situation, but it was structural. It was a societal thing. And I I just think that this internal cost that women carry, this like decision, am I going to be assertive or am I going to be likable? I think that feeds into this. There was a series of studies that have consistently found that women who claim credit or advocate for themselves are evaluated more negatively than men who exhibit the same behavior. And
Yeah, of
so,
course, because women are looked at as like if then you're aggressive or
right.
you're, assertive. And it's like these are all words that are considered positive for men and negative when culturally speaking about women in our society. And
I'll be
so
frank,
it's
I don't want people to think I'm a bitch. But that's how I feel like I am viewed. Like you anticipate those social penalties. Even when like you're completely justified, you're like, this is somebody is gonna think I'm a bitch.
yeah,
And
of
then
course. Of
we
course. I mean,
freeze,
I
we
know
second
we're
guess
going to
ourselves.
I know we're not going to share this story yet, but like there's a story that I want to share. But to your point,
Go ahead and share it. I
When
want to hear what you
Go
have
ahead
to
and share.
say.
Okay, okay. So, um, obviously we have a podcast and there are some very specific topics that we talk about, ways that we verbalize it. We are very intentional in giving credit to people that we get ideas from. We love to call out our friends and our colleagues in our episodes. It's one of our favorite things to
Absolutely.
do. And not so long ago, after the podcast started, I sent you some clips that I found of another podcaster who had
A woman, to
a
be fair,
woman,
right?
another
This
female
is yep.
podcaster, yeah, who had, in my view, plagiarized our ideas, used some words that were very specific that
Yeah.
actually came to me from another colleague who we gave credit to in that episode. And they were just nuanced. It was highly nuanced, the conversation. And I thought, okay, it's possible that this is a one off. So and we've really never done anything about it. And the reason, is like, I want to share this story because I want to talk about it. But I have this also still, like, very honestly, have this fear of calling out and hurting someone's professional reputation, whether they've done something that I think is inappropriate or not. And
Well,
so,
and this is a super gray area, right? Because
yeah,
it's one thing to take someone's slides and reuse them. That's pretty obviously plagiarism. It is one thing to stand at the podium and force the other person to sit down next to you and claim ownership of the material, right? Those are not gray areas. Those are just wrong. And even in those situations, I was like gulping and thinking, should I say anything? And then being like, no, I have to say something. These what you're talking about is a gray area because we talk about a lot of topics that
that lots
I
of people
mean,
think
the
about.
that's we literally say, like, in our intro, what everyone's thinking, but no one's saying, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
we wanna get these ideas out there, and there are other people who are thinking it too, right? So you don't wanna shut anybody down. You don't
No,
wanna
but I
say, "No,
would
this is
be
my
nice.
idea, and you can't
No,
share it because I"
you can't share it, but acknowledgement is the key, right?
It really is.
Recognizing that you got an idea that somebody else made you think, right? That
Yes.
somebody else made you think or gave you an idea or helped you along the way. And so I've tried to look at this situation. So it happened a couple of other times after. So
It
it
happened 3
feels
times total, and then you told me that you actually stopped looking at that person's
listen, yeah,
posts and listening to their podcast because you were like,
because
"This
I
is too
was like, I
painful."
don't, yeah,
And
exactly. And I've tried to just be flattered by it and kind of move
I
on.
flattery does not pay the bills, though. I
True.
think that,
This is true.
that old saying, "You can die from exposure."
Yeah.
People offer you exposure and you're like, "Yeah, I'm done. Thank you." It's hard though because you want those ideas to get out there. So, like, when is
Yeah.
it theft and when is it
And when
overlap?
is it like overlap? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And sometimes and we have another story that is similar to this too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have very similar ideas as a colleague. Do you want to talk about the
What
very
happened with
recent?
Nicole?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
share
okay, so
what happened with Nicole.
I asked Nicole, her permission to use her name with this, and she was like, "Hell yes!" And then she said, "Just make me look good," and I'm like, "Girl,
I'm
you always
like,
look good."
"That's what I said." I'm like, "You can't, like,
She's
is there
fierce.
any other
She's
option?"
fierce. She is inspiring. So we had a misunderstanding that thankfully, because she is open and assertive and all of those things that, people get social sanctioning for, she does it anyway. And so thankfully, because she's open about these things, we were able to clear up a misunderstanding. So our episode that came out on imposterism, she saw a social media post where we talk about the fact that we don't think it should be called imposter syndrome because there's no syndrome, there's no health, there's no pandemic going on here. Like, this is just a normal part of being human. It's very natural. Most people struggle with these feelings. of imposterism. And we mentioned that in a social media post. And Nicole texts the two of us and she's like, credit where credit is due. Come on, ladies. And I'm like,
We were so
what is
confused.
she talking about?
Yeah.
Well, what had happened was this. So Nicole did not know that I've been talking about this for a good 3+ years now. She hadn't like come across my posts on the topic. She hadn't come
Or your
across my
training.
the training that I do or the thing that I did for the CFO project, that a lot of different things where I've been saying, isn't that a syndrome? Bleh, drives me nuts when people turns out drives her nuts too. So what had happened was about 10 months ago or so, we were having a conversation in our theater public speaking society WhatsApp, and this topic came up and she shared a lot of ideas, really valuable stuff, really great thought leadership. And I totally agreed with what she was saying. And Misty was like, hey, Nancy, do you want to chime in here? Because Misty knows that this has been an area that I've been speaking about for quite some time. And I have some ideas on this that are a little bit different than other folks out there. And she was like, hey, do you want to share? But it was right when everything was going on with my mom suddenly, being in the hospital and the rehabilitation center and me trying to get her on Medicaid. And it was major emergencies. And I was like, thanks, Misty, but I'm like, this is going to have to happen later. And it did. I ended up putting some stuff together for the advanced theater public speaking retreat on the topic. But I didn't talk about it in that moment. And so Nicole did not know. She had no way of knowing that I did not take what she said and use
And
it
it was
with
so
no
from
attribution.
right, and it was the concepts were very similar, and that's what it
Yes.
was that made her go, "Oh, okay," because they're both unique, right? Like,
We
they're
well,
it's
I mean, like my overall perspective and her overall perspective and the details of it, whatever, there are definitely there's a lot of
differences.
unique thought in there. But this concept about not calling it a syndrome, that is
Yes.
something that we share. So that's convergent evolution at work, right? It's where
Mhm.
the need for a concept uh, is there, and more than one person comes up with the idea at the same time.
That's right, and it happens a lot.
It does,
It does, it happens a
Es-
lot, and so it's like
especially in this space that you and I are
mhm.
talking about, and she counts. And even you know what, I'm gonna give Dan and Rich an out here. I'm not the only person who talks about 1099s. I am not. That is not a unique thought. The slides were unique. Some of how I'm teaching it is unique, but like lots of people talk about technical stuff, and it's hard to suss out like where was their original thought. Just because we're both talking about the same topic, that's a technical topic. That's there's no ownership there. So
Right.
it's a gray area, right? It's a really well, bless her heart. She reached out. She was very upset. We talked about it and I explained this and I even gave her like a link to this a presentation that was recorded from a few years ago that she knew that I wasn't taking that from her. I did go in and I changed the She Counts social media post to include her name. We had shouted out Jennifer Diamond, but we hadn't shouted out Nicole
Nicole,
Davis because we hadn't mentioned, I don't think we mentioned her name on the actual
on the
episode.
actual
But I just included her name. I'm like, because we've been having these conversations
mhm.
and it's so attribution's so important to me that I was just horrified that she thought that we
Yeah,
would, especially because we
and
mention her on this show
what's
like
important
constantly.
to note is that those that I know, right? Like, I'm like, we should just put her we should just give her attribution for every episode
On
because
every
she is
episode because
so,
she's
important to she is such a thought leader and so important to you and I and how
yeah.
we, formulate and share ideas, but, yeah, I think that it's important to recognize that, like, misunderstandings, they happen,
Yes,
right?
they
Like,
happen,
it's
but you gotta bring it up, and where Nicole
yeah.
really shined in this moment, I was so impressed, is that she said something. She was upset, She brought it up with us. She did not like let that resentment fester. She brought it up. I was able to clear it up, and she apologized. She's like, "Oh my gosh, we're just both thinking great thoughts at the same time." Like that,
Yeah.
it
Great
doesn't
minds
surprise
think
me, right?
alike, right? Yeah,
Yes.
as they say.
Yes, and so, I to me that was really inspiring, and it's one of the reasons that I immediately reached out to Dan and Rich recently, is that I was like, "No, we've gotta say these things out loud because maybe there's a misunderstanding, or who knows what. If we don't say the things out loud, they will fester, we will become resentful, and we're not helping out each other, and we're not helping out our society, and we're not helping out with the diversity of ideas and all of that stuff."
That's right. So this happens a lot, right? We've shared a number of stories and it's like all over the spectrum. And I know that you have a story that you feel is different in some pretty specific ways. So,
Well, it's one of these gray area stories that, you were talking about how can you tell
well,
when is it
most of
theft
them
and
are
when is it
gray,
overlap?
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
most of
and
them
most
are.
of
But I want to make it clear that whether it's gray or not, we need to speak up for each other and for ourselves and for other people, right? And this is a happy ending story where that happened. So our listeners may at this point be like, damn, Nancy gets her stuff stolen an awful lot. Yes, this happens to me a lot. I don't know why. I don't know what it is, but it has happened quite a few times. Maybe I just have such great ideas. I don't know, but it has
well, you have
happened a
great
lot.
ideas and people catch it. You have, you know, great
I have eyes on the
relationships. So
ground.
that's what I was
People
gonna say.
catch it. You just said it.
You have incredible relationships. So when people see something that they know is yours, they tell you. So I
Yes,
think it's a
yes. So
combination of things.
this this story, this happened last year. I think this happened last year and a half ago, I think, ish. And so this slide situation that we talked about before was like a clear reuse of my work, the podium story, clear misattribution of my labor. This story is different because it's in that gray zone that we were talking about. Like who comes up with original ideas and who has access to other people's ideas and that kind of thing. Because, like you said, most of the harm it lives in this gray area. So what happened was I am in the group Realize, which is Jason Statz's community for firm runners. And he had a really cool class where it was how to create a community, like how to build a paid community. And I participated in that. And that's where I built out a lot of the Ask a CPA community stuff that I had been thinking about for a long time. But now it was like how to get my questions answered and just do it. And one of the most important things that he taught me was just don't wait until it's perfect. It's never going to be perfect and it's going to change later on anyway. Just launch. And it was very, very helpful and motivational. But we shared a lot of information in there about what we were going to be doing. And I had talked with him about the fact that I was starting this community for bookkeepers who would like to collaborate with tax professionals, but for whatever reason, they don't feel safe talking to their clients' tax pros because they get treated condescendingly or because it might damage their credibility. And there's this really awful tension between um, tax pros and bookkeepers that I want to help address. It's the topic that I've talked about it at Tax Retreat. I've talked about it Scaling New Heights. I'll be talking about it at Engage this year. This is my thing, right? It's my thing. I've been talking about this for a long time. And he had insight into all of this stuff that I was doing with this community. And I ran into him at Bridging the Gap and told him, hey, you're never gonna believe it. We launched. I'm so excited. And I told him about some of the stuff that was going on. And like 2 or 3 weeks later, he's got a social media post up saying, there's so much tension between tax pros and bookkeepers. And how can we address this? And I want bookkeepers to tell me what makes them frustrated about tax pros. And tax pros, I want you to tell me what do you wish bookkeepers knew? And I was like, hey, we've got these lists, Jason. We've already got these lists. I've made them at Tax Retreat. I've made them at with my bookkeepers in this group. Like I've been doing this research a long time, fella. But I found out about it because a bunch of people saw these posts, and in the comments, they were tagging me, and they're like, "Hey, this is a thing
Oh,
Nancy's put a lot of thought into.
work
Hey,
into,
I
yeah.
don't, yeah, I don't know if I would have come
So
across
what
it otherwise." So I
happened?
email him. I email him, and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, I'm really glad you're doing this because you have a way bigger platform than I do and you can
Right.
get it out to more people. But why don't we collaborate on this? Because I have already done this work. Why don't you invite me on your podcast and we can present the results of the research you're doing, which lines up really, really, really well with the research that I've done and the crowdsourcing and all of that kind of stuff." And he wrote me back and he was like, "Hey, the podcast's already planned and it's too late to have you be a part of it, but I will give you a shout out." So, in two different episodes, the one that's about what bookkeepers wish tax pros knew, and one of them is about what
Mhm.
tax pros wish bookkeepers know. He was like, "And if there's one person out there who's really doing great work in this area, it's Nancy, the dancing accountant, and her Ask a CPA community." And so he did give me credit attribution in the two podcast episodes.
That's
Um,
great. Did he
so
acknowledge that, and maybe he didn't know this and maybe it didn't, I don't know, but did he acknowledge that the idea for the post, like, had been spurred by, like, a conversation with you?
so he did not, and that, I'll fault him for that one. He said, "Oh, for some reason I thought the community you were building was for small business owners. I didn't realize it was bookkeepers." I It's
Oh.
really hard to believe that that's true because we definitely have talked about it a decent amount. But I have a good relationship with him, and I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt on this one. I do think that this triggered him. The conversation that we had at Bridging the Gap triggered him to think this is a really important thing that I should bring up, and he literally just forgot where that
Oh, I
idea
think
came
that
from.
that happens so often.
It
It's like,
does.
especially if you're having conversations and it's a casual conversation and you're just, having through the natural course, something like that comes up, you go to bed, you sleep on it for a long time, and then you wake up and think that it was something that, it can be spurred
Absolutely.
from so many different places. So,
I do it to myself sometimes when I'm, like, writing articles. I'll, like, reuse words that I used earlier in the article, like, when I come back to it the next day because 'cause I've forgotten that I already talked about it. Well, there's actually a scientific term for it, a sociological term called source confusion. I mentioned convergent thinking earlier, but source confusion is another part of this, and the idea there is that people remember ideas better than sources, and cognitive psychology research shows that source memory degrades faster than idea memory. So, unintentional misattribution or lack of attribution is more likely when people repeatedly engage with the same themes. And that's exactly what happens in Jason's and my world, right?
yeah.
Candy Bello mentioned in our Theater Public Speaking Society WhatsApp. Obviously, listeners are like, "Wow, that's a really active WhatsApp." Yes, it is. You'll open your phone and it'll be like 794 new
I
messages.
know. I can't. I love
It's a
all the
little
women, but
overwhelming
I'm like,
sometimes.
"Oh yeah, I'm an
Yeah.
introvert, right?" So,
Right? Well, Candy Bello mentioned in there, and I asked her permission to use her name here. Somebody called her out for plagiarizing something in a social media post, and she realized that she had unintentionally reproduced an idea. She really did think it was her own. She genuinely did. So that's why we cannot automatically presume malice or
all right. That's right. And that's a
intent.
good I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And it's like you genuinely hear it, process it, think about it later, like something brings it top of mind and it's like you don't remember necessarily where that came from. So it does
And so,
happen.
where does it become problematic, though, is that women are encouraged to build in public, collaborate, share generously, but the system still rewards those who claim ownership last or loudest or with the most reach or the highest status, right? So you've got this constant internal, like, do I speak up or do I let it go for the greater good or do I protect my work or do I risk being seen as ungenerous or do I want credit or do I want progress? So now that my therapy session is over, we want to give a constructive path forward. We've talked about some of this already, but I want to know, question, what actually changes outcomes.
I think what actually changes outcomes is, well, number one, awareness, which is why we're sharing it, right? We
Mhm.
want there needs to be an awareness and an acknowledgement that this happens. And that also is part of the reason that we do this. Like, so nobody feels alone in the fact that this is happening. And then again, basically exactly what happened to you is when you see it, like validation that this has taken place, right? From colleagues and peers, people sharing with you that this has happened. And when you reach out to someone, so it's forcing yourself to reach out to someone and to address it, right? And to say, I
Yes.
feel like this is what has happened. Like, what you did and what Nicole did and what so many of the people sharing in the story did. I mean, what would you add to that that would change that you feel would change outcomes?
I mean, I think that this shift from the individual response to the collective response is the most important thing that can really bring societal change, but can also make a difference in the individual instances, right? Like instead of spiraling in isolation and self-doubt, I have peers that I can go to.
Yes.
And it becomes a collective support, right? Trusted peers that are acting as, I don't know, witnesses, right? Like, and they're
Yeah.
lending me
Or
certainty that I might not have had.
giving you validation. Like when you told me what was happening, I think my literal response to you was WTF. And I think
Yes.
Nicole's response to you was WTAF. And so it was
Yeah.
like, here's some, first of all, let's get validation for the fact that you are right for feeling this way.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, so when we speak up for each other, two things happen. Number one, we make it safer for someone else to name harm. So it's easier for me to reach out to say, "Hey, this happened," if there are a bunch of people in the comments or in the chat saying, "Hey, this was Nancy's. This is Nancy's thing." So that just makes it safer for me because then now I'm not the only person who's like, "Meh, meh, meh, I'm upset. I want you to, placate me." Instead, they're kind of setting the stage, putting some groundwork in there. And the other thing that happens is we actually retrain our nervous systems to recognize that just because something is uncomfortable and we speak out about it, it doesn't mean we're overreacting. And I think women generally are like, this is uncomfortable to say out loud, therefore I must be overreacting. Or I know you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I ask myself that all of the time.
I mean, I really think that shared clarity is so important because then it's not just confrontation, right? So, like, I am not telling these stories about what went wrong to be like, doesn't that suck? I am sharing them to show what went right and why that matters so dang much because we got to normalize these internal reactions that women are trained to suppress. And we need to reduce for each other the personal risk of speaking up. And Question, something that you have talked about a lot is allyship and sponsorship from men.
Exactly. Yeah.
Think about what that could do in this situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, they could start by making sure that they're not doing it, right?
Well,
So
yes, that's
that's
true.
I mean, everybody needs to do that, not just men, but we do know from the data that it does disproportionately happen to
Yes.
women. So,
I I
and that
mean,
would be a
but
good
it's
start.
important to remember it's not villainous behavior most of the time. It's in that gray area, right? So like it's normalized professional behavior. And so when a man hears you in conversation say something warmly, right? To be like, "Oh yeah, that's what Question was just telling us,"
Yes,
very loudly,
exactly. Yeah, very
right?
loudly. Like, "Oh, that's right." Yes. So then people recognize that's where the idea came from. Yeah. We'd like to close with some reflective questions for listeners to think about how they share ideas, credit others, and speak up for themselves and for each other. And the first one is, where are you sharing your work that represents your expertise? Also, who benefits when your name is removed? And what would change if you treated your ideas as assets instead of favors? Because that's what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
This has been an amazing conversation. I feel like it's been a long time coming,
Yeah.
and I feel like we have so much content that we couldn't stop ourselves. So I've
Yeah, this
learned
was so good. Thank you for being my therapy today. I appreciate it.
I'm always happy to be your therapist. So um, as we wrap up, we would like to ask listeners to follow our She Counts podcast LinkedIn page and to join in on the conversation by sharing under the episode, credit where due. Have you ever had your work passed off by someone else as their own? We really want to hear your stories. Like, I really hope that we get some of you to chime in and share the stories that have happened to you because I think it's really important for everyone to know that this is happening and with how much frequency it's happening, and it's also a good outlet just to get it out there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a famous quote by Virginia Woolf. I'd venture to guess that for most of history, Anonymous was a woman.
Thanks for being here with us on She Counts, the Real Talk podcast for women in accounting.
If something in today's episode hit home for you, girl, get in touch with me because it does me too. That's exactly why we're doing this.
So you feel seen, heard, and never alone.
Remember, you can get CPE credit for listening at earmark.app. Links to that, as well as how to learn more about our sponsors and their solutions and any other resource will be in the show notes.
And please subscribe and leave us a review because it helps us help other people find the podcast. And we would also be honored if you would share with another woman in accounting who needs to hear it too.
We'll see everyone in 2 weeks.